The narrative of transformative leadership often begins with a singular, compelling anecdote that encapsulates the essence of a leader's unique approach. For Steve Jobs, such a story unfolds just weeks before the iconic iPhone was scheduled to be unveiled to the world. And at this critical juncture, Jobs became utterly convinced that the device's plastic screen, which was then part of the design, was simply inadequate. It possessed a susceptibility to scratches that, in his view, would profoundly compromise the pristine user experience he envisioned. His solution, delivered with characteristic conviction, was audacious: replace the plastic with scratch-proof Gorilla Glass, a material that at the time existed merely as a prototype. This insistence, articulated despite the aggressive timelines and significant engineering challenges it presented, sent shockwaves through the company, necessitating a frantic last-minute redesign. Yet, Jobs' unshakable certainty ultimately prevailed, culminating in a more perfect product that would redefine an industry. This opening vignette immediately invites contemplation of a leader whose belief in an idea was so potent, so absolute, that it appeared to bend the very fabric of reality. It compelled highly skilled teams to achieve feats that, by all conventional metrics, seemed. This dramatic example serves as the perfect gateway to introduce unshakable certainty as the foundational principle of Steve Jobs' mental dominance. It was this unwavering, almost zealous belief in his vision that enabled him to drive revolutionary products and fundamentally reshape entire industries. This conviction transcended mere self-confidence, becoming the bedrock upon which Apple's most significant innovations were built. The initial observation of Jobs' leadership in this context reveals a compelling paradox. While his profound conviction undeniably led to the creation of a more perfect product, it simultaneously generated shockwaves through the company. This juxtaposition highlights a fundamental duality inherent in his leadership style. On one hand, his unyielding belief drove unparalleled excellence and pushed the boundaries of what was deemed achievable. On the other, it imposed immense pressure, disruption, and often significant personal cost on those around him. This inherent tension, where profound vision meets demanding execution, sets a critical tone for understanding Jobs' principle. It moves beyond a simple celebration of success to a more nuanced exploration of the intricate trade-offs and complexities embedded within his transformative approach. Throughout this exploration, a deeper understanding will be cultivated regarding how Jobs cultivated this deep conviction, exploring the mechanisms through which he leveraged what is termed mental model innovation. Crucially, the infamous reality distortion field will be dissected, examining how he wielded this psychological tool to achieve what many deemed unattainable. Ultimately, this analysis aims to empower individuals to consider how they might think different and make their own significant contributions to the world by understanding the philosophical underpinnings of Jobs' success. Unshakable certainty in the context of Steve Jobs extends far beyond conventional notions of self-confidence or optimism. It denotes an unwavering, almost dogmatic belief in his vision and an extraordinary, almost hypnotic ability to project this conviction so powerfully that it influenced and persuaded others. This influence frequently manifested in defiance of conventional logic, established norms, or perceived technical limitation. It was a deeply ingrained conviction that his approach, his design choices, and his strategic direction were unequivocally correct, irrespective of external skepticism or internal dissent. This was not a fleeting emotion, but a profound, almost spiritual commitment to his chosen path, which permeated every aspect of his professional life. This deeply held certainty was inextricably linked to Jobs' broader philosophy and served as a defining characteristic throughout his career. It empowered him to articulate audacious goals that seemed impossible to others, such as creating a phone without a physical keyboard or a computer with elegant, professional typography. This conviction was not merely about what he believed, it was about how that belief manifested in his actions and interactions, becoming a relentless driving force for innovation and market disruption. This internal certainty found its most potent external expression in what his Apple colleagues Bud Tribble and Andy Hertzfeld famously termed the reality distortion field. The term itself originated from Star Trek, where alien beings possessed the ability to create their own world through sheer mental force. Biographer Walter Isaacson noted that Robert Friedland introduced Jobs to this captivating concept around 1972, long before it became synonymous with Jobs' leadership style. The RDF, as described by Hertzfeld, was a confounding melange of several potent elements: a charismatic rhetorical style, an indomitable will, and an eagerness to bend any fact to fit the purpose at hand. This was not simple persuasion, it was a psychological force that could distort his co-workers' perception of proportion and the scale of difficulties, making them believe that any impossible task he presented was in fact achievable. A critical observation emerges regarding the intertwined nature of conviction and influence in Jobs' leadership. The definition of unshakable certainty immediately highlights its connection to his extraordinary ability to project this conviction so powerfully that it influenced and persuaded others. This projection is then directly identified as the reality distortion field. This establishes a clear causal relationship. Jobs' internal state of unshakable certainty served as the fundamental cause, which was actively externalized through his distinctive personality and communication style, acting as the mechanism. This process resulted in the formation of the RDF, which then effectively influenced and persuaded those around him. This dynamic illustrates that for Jobs, conviction was not a passive belief, but an active, outward-directed force meticulously designed to shape perceptions and ultimately control outcomes. This mental dominance was far from a mere personality quirk. It was foundational to Apple's trajectory and its ability to consistently redefine industry. It allowed Jobs to set audacious goals that defied prevailing industry norms, overcome immense skepticism from both internal teams and external competitors, and inspire his teams to achieve feats that were initially considered unattainable. The RDF, therefore, was not just a phenomenon to be observed, it was the psychological engine behind Apple's most significant innovations, transforming visionary ideas into tangible, market-shaping realities. This perspective frames Jobs' psychological influence as a critical strategic tool. The ability to shape the mindset and belief systems of his team in the market was not secondary to product development or marketing. It was a fundamental prerequisite for achieving breakthrough innovation. This suggests that psychological dominance was a core component of his strategic arsenal, enabling the realization of what others deemed impossible. Perhaps no single product better illustrates Steve Jobs' unshakable certainty than the genesis of the iPhone. He championed the audacious idea of a single revolutionary device that would converge an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. This vision was particularly bold given Apple's complete lack of history in designing telecommunications products. The skepticism was palpable even from industry titans. Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer famously dismissed the iPhone as the most expensive phone in the world that doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard. Ballmer's comments, rooted in the prevailing mental models of the time, utterly failed to grasp the paradigm shift Jobs envisioned. Jobs' unshakable certainty ultimately proved Ballmer profoundly incorrect, not just by outselling competitors, but by fundamentally reframing the very concept of a mobile phone, ushering in the smartphone era. Ballmer's dismissal clearly indicated that he was operating within the existing mental model of mobile phones, characterized by physical keyboards and a primary focus on business utility. Jobs' success, however, was not merely about creating a better product within that established model, but about fundamentally reframing the very concept of a mobile phone. This demonstrates that Jobs' unshakable certainty enabled him to transcend existing market definitions and create entirely new categories of products. His conviction allowed him to envision and then bring into existence a future that others, bound by current paradigms, simply could not imagine. This capacity to redefine market expectations highlights the profound impact of conviction as a market redefiner. Another powerful example of Jobs' conviction, coupled with a surprising capacity for strategic adaptation, is the story of the App Store. Initially, Jobs envisioned all applications running directly within a version of Safari on the iPhone. This represented his initial mental model for software distribution on the device. However, when critics and early adopters expressed strong dissent and a clear desire for native applications, he relented and reframed, creating the App Store. This adaptation was not a compromise of his core certainty in the iPhone's potential as a powerful computing platform. Instead, it was a strategic rechanneling of his conviction into a new, even more successful mental model for software distribution, one that unlocked an unprecedented ecosystem of third-party development and value creation. This showcases a crucial nuance in his approach. Unshakable certainty about the ultimate vision can coexist with pragmatic flexibility in the method of achieving it. The phrase relented and reframed might initially suggest a weakening of conviction. However, a deeper examination clarifies that this was not a compromise of his core certainty but rather a strategic rechanneling of his conviction into a new, even more successful mental model. This reveals a sophisticated understanding of conviction. It is not rigidity but an unwavering commitment to the ultimate destination, allowing for tactical pivots when a chosen path proves suboptimal. This demonstrates that Jobs' certainty was focused on the desired outcome, not necessarily every single step of the journey, highlighting a pragmatic flexibility within his profound belief. This flexible conviction allowed him to adapt and innovate even when his initial approach faced resistance. Jobs' conviction in the Mac's inherent superiority was vividly demonstrated through the iconic "I'm a Mac, I'm a PC" commercial campaign. This series of advertisements, launched during a critical period for Apple, successfully convinced new customers to buy a Mac instead of a PC. It achieved this not through a dry recitation of technical specifications, but by reframing the choice through a compelling, albeit simplified, narrative. The campaign personified the Mac as cool, creative, and intuitive, contrasting it with the perceived stuffiness and complexity of the PC. This campaign powerfully highlighted Jobs' capacity to shift public perception and reshape consumer preferences through the sheer force of a compelling, conviction-driven narrative. The success of the "I'm a Mac, I'm a PC" campaign in convincing new customers by reframing the choice extends beyond mere marketing. It illustrates how Jobs' deep conviction in the Mac's identity and superiority allowed him to craft a powerful narrative that actively shaped public perception. This demonstrates that his certainty was not confined to product development, but extended to the strategic communication and branding of Apple's offerings. This shows that conviction can be a potent tool for influencing market narrative and consumer behavior, turning a product into a cultural statement. During the challenging Next era, Jobs exhibited an unwavering focus on meeting the aggressive spring 1987 launch deadline for the next computer. When a team member, perhaps overwhelmed by the scale of the task, suggested a year's delay, Jobs was resolute in his refusal. He articulated with chilling clarity the dire consequences of missing that critical window: technological obsolescence, the erosion of credibility in the nascent market, and the potential inability to attract and retain top talent. His conviction drove this aggressive timeline, believing it was not merely ambitious, but absolutely critical for the company's survival and future success. This anecdote underscores how Jobs' unshakable certainty was often tied to an acute awareness of market timing and the existential imperative of decisive action. Jobs' articulation of dire consequences for missing the next launch deadline reveals that his conviction was deeply rooted in a strategic understanding of market dynamics and competitive pressure. This was not simply about personal stubbornness. It was about believing that timely execution, driven by his certainty, was essential for the company's very survival and its ability to attract and retain top talent. This demonstrates the practical, high-stakes application of his unshakable belief, transforming it from an abstract principle into a critical business imperative. His conviction in this instance was a direct driver of urgency and ultimately a strategy for survival. To truly understand the intensity and sometimes challenging nature of Jobs' single-mindedness and unshakable certainty, it is valuable to consider the potential influence of traits associated with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. This condition is characterized by a preoccupation with rules, orderliness, and control, coupled with an unwavering conviction in one's own method. This predisposition offers a psychological lens through which to view his reputation for being difficult to work for and his tendency to blow his stack when something wasn't done the right way, which invariably meant his way. The presence of these traits suggests a fundamental psychological basis for his intense drive and his often uncompromising demands, moving beyond simple personality to a deeper, more ingrained predisposition. The direct correlation between Jobs' single-mindedness and unshakable certainty and traits associated with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, OCPD. It suggests that his drive was not merely a learned behavior, but potentially rooted in a deep-seated psychological predisposition. This perspective moves beyond descriptive observations of his behavior, such as being difficult to work for or insisting on his way, to offer a potential underlying cause, enriching the understanding of the origins of his extreme drive and its profound impact on his leadership style. This illustrates the psychological roots of extremism in his pursuit of vision. While undeniably powerful, the reality distortion field operated as a complex and often ethically ambiguous. Andy Hertzfeld's description of it as a confounding melange of a charismatic rhetorical style, an indomitable will, and an eagerness to bend any fact to fit the purpose at hand, reveals its nuanced nature. The RDF was effective even when individuals were acutely aware of it, a testament to Jobs' extraordinary persuasive power. However, its effects would fade after Steve departed, suggesting a transient, presence-dependent influence rather than a lasting shift in belief. This raises important questions about the sustainability of such influence and its ethical implications, as it could be perceived not merely as inspiration, but as a form of manipulation. The ability to bend facts and disregard inconvenient truths while driving results treads a fine line ethically. The observation that the RDF's effects would fade after Steve departed is a critical consideration regarding the nature of influence Jobs wielded. It implies that his power was heavily reliant on his physical presence and continuous projection of conviction, rather than fostering an internalized, self-sustaining belief within his team. This suggests a limitation to his leadership style. While highly effective for immediate results and pushing boundaries, it might not have built long-term independent conviction or psychological resilience in his followers. This raises questions about organizational sustainability and the capacity for innovation beyond the charismatic leader's immediate sphere of influence. To further elaborate on the components of the reality distortion field, it is helpful to break down its constituent parts. First, his charismatic rhetorical style was not merely compelling communication. It often involved employing hyperbolic superlatives to describe products and visions. Jobs possessed an almost theatrical ability to cast a spell, making the impossible seem inevitable and the mundane appear revolutionary. His presentations, known as Steving Outs, were public manifestations of this power, mesmerizing audiences and shaping gut perception of Apple products. Bill Gates, a formidable leader in his own right, acknowledged Jobs' unique ability to cast spells on people, even while considering himself immune to their direct effects. Second, his indomitable will refers to an unwavering resolve and a profound refusal to accept impossible as a valid constraint. Jobs would push relentlessly towards a desired outcome, his willpower a force that simply would not yield. This was evident in instances like his insistence on the iPhone's glass screen, where he urged them to meet his expedited timeline, and they ultimately succeeded despite initial protests. Third, bending facts, selective memory was perhaps the most ethically complex core of the argument. It involved adapting arguments, occasionally adopting others' ideas without acknowledgement, and disregarding inconvenient truths to fit the narrative. This demonstrated the malleability of reality within his field, where his conviction could reshape the origin of ideas, sometimes presenting an idea back to its originator just a week after dismissing it. While effective in driving a unified vision, this aspect raises significant ethical concerns about truthfulness and intellectual honesty. Fourth, aspiration and FOMO, fear of missing out. Jobs was a master at appealing to a higher purpose, such as the desire to create a dent in the universe. He imbued his team's work with cosmic significance, making them believe they were part of something far greater than themselves. Simultaneously, he generated a powerful sense of urgency or fear of missing out on a unique, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. When facing a deadline crunch, he would use phrases like, "Don't you want to create a dent in the universe?" or "This is the kind of opportunity that only comes around once in a lifetime," to powerfully shift perspective and motivate. Finally, dismissal of concerns involved minimizing difficulties and often ignoring potential burnout or personal sacrifices of team members to maintain focus on the objective. The phrase, "You guys have been working on this stuff for months now, another couple weeks isn't going to kill you," exemplifies this tactic, minimizing the burden of extra work and often overlooking the human cost. This was where the human cost of the RDF became most apparent, leading to resentment and burnout among his team members. The components of the RDF, particularly bending In fact, selective memory and dismissal of concerns are not ethically neutral. These tactics imply a willingness to prioritize the desired outcome over objective truth or the well-being of others. This directly leads to a critical ethical consideration: where does visionary leadership, which inspires and pushes boundaries, cross into manipulation, which disregards truth and potentially exploits individuals? This forces a critical examination of the moral dimensions of highly persuasive leadership, highlighting the ethical tightrope walked by those who wield such influence. While driving immense success and innovation, this intense certainty often came at a significant personal cost for Jobs. It profoundly impacted his family life and his ability to connect with others on a human level. His refusal of contact with his biological father and his notoriously difficult personality, which famously led to his hiatus from Apple in the 1980s, serve as poignant examples of these personal toll. The very strength that enabled his mental dominance and transformative impact also contained its greatest weaknesses in human terms, creating a complex and often contradictory portrait of a leader. In summary, the manifestation of Jobs' conviction, possibly rooted in OCPD traits and early life experiences, created the reality distortion field. This field, in turn, acted as a powerful yet ethically ambiguous catalyst for pushing boundaries in product development and market acceptance. The very strength that enabled his dominance also contained its greatest weaknesses in human terms, illustrating a profound and often uncomfortable truth about the nature of transformative leadership. This suggests that Jobs' extraordinary capacity for innovation and influence was not entirely separate from his more challenging psychological predisposition. It implies that in some cases, the very source of extreme drive and unconventional success might be intertwined with personality traits that also lead to personal and interpersonal difficulties, presenting a complex, non-judgmental view of the origins of genius. This highlights the inseparable link between what some might perceive as pathology and his undeniable genius. To cultivate a powerful vision and drive transformative change, individuals and organizations must first cultivate a core conviction. This involves identifying and deeply believing in a fundamental vision or mission for their work or project. It is about articulating a clear why that transcends mere profit or transient goals, focusing instead on the core problem being solved, the profound need being met, or the new reality being created. This deep belief serves as an internal compass, guiding decisions and providing resilience in the face of adversity. Without this unwavering conviction, efforts can become diffused, and the ability to inspire others may falter. Leaders must also learn to articulate their vision, not just with logic, but by mastering persuasion through reframing. This means presenting problems and possibilities in a way that resonates emotionally and intellectually with the audience, effectively challenging existing mental models. As Jobs demonstrated with the iPhone, it is about making people see a new reality, even if they did not initially realize they needed it. This involves compelling storytelling, clear articulation of benefits, and the ability to simplify complex ideas into irresistible narratives that shift perception and create demand. It is crucial to understand the dual nature of influence. While strong conviction can be an incredibly powerful motivator, inspiring teams to achieve extraordinary feats, it also carries the inherent risk of alienating others or fostering burnout. The deeper dive section extensively explored the ethical ambiguities and potential negative implications of Jobs' RDF, including aspects of manipulation and the potential for burnout among teams. This actionable recommendation directly addresses those concerns by providing a prescriptive solution. Leaders must recognize this duality and consciously aim for inspirational leadership that empowers and elevates rather than manipulates or coerces. This requires empathy, transparency, and a genuine concern for the well-being of those being led, ensuring that high performance is sustainable and ethically sound. This represents an ethical imperative for conscious leadership, balancing drive with responsibility. Finally, embracing mental model innovation is key to truly disruptive success. This involves not just innovating products or services, but innovating the very way people think about the problem the product solves, or the industry itself. The concept of mental model innovation elevates the discussion of innovation beyond mere feature sets or technological advancements. It implies a deeper, more fundamental change in how users perceive and interact with a solution or problem. The App Store example perfectly illustrates this principle. Jobs did not just innovate an app, he innovated the entire distribution and consumption model for mobile software. This highlights that true disruption often comes from reshaping cognitive frameworks, not just tangible products, suggesting a higher level of strategic thinking that goes beyond the product itself. Leaders should be prepared to adapt their approach, as Jobs did with the App Store, if initial mental models do not resonate with the market, without losing sight of the core, overarching vision. It is about being flexible in tactics while remaining unshakable in strategic intent, constantly seeking to redefine the landscape of possibility. In essence, Steve Jobs' unshakable certainty and his formidable reality distortion field were not merely personal quirks or abstract concepts. They were fundamental driving forces behind his unparalleled ability to innovate, lead, and transform industries. His life serves as a powerful testament to the idea that a profound, unwavering belief in a vision, when channeled effectively, can indeed dent the universe. Jobs' legacy extends far beyond the products he created. It lies in the enduring demonstration of how a leader's conviction can inspire, push boundaries, and ultimately shape the future. His approach continues to influence leaders and innovators across diverse fields, reminding us of the immense power inherent in a deeply held belief. As this exploration concludes, individuals are encouraged to reflect on their own conviction. What is the core vision that drives their work or personal endeavors? How can they cultivate and project their vision with greater clarity, persuasive power, and unwavering belief? And as they do so, how will they remain mindful of the profound impact, both positive and potentially challenging, that their certainty can have on those around them, ensuring that their pursuit of greatness is both transformative and responsible? The journey of Steve Jobs provides a compelling blueprint for how unshakable certainty can become the ultimate catalyst for mental dominance and world-changing innovation.